The following is an Operation Podcast production. Is there a health advantage to being generous?
Many. The brain, which is where everything happens. When you do something kind, you feel good. I mean, there's a helper's high. It's called that for a reason. But neurotransmitters, endorphins, all these things are released. You really feel better. And the dopamine, the oxytocin that flood your brain, it cascades through the rest of your body. And so we can actually see that when someone is generous, when they give of themselves with no expectation of return, they just give. And it could be small. It could be a smile at the right time. And you know you've made a difference in that person's day. Our bodies literally feel it, reduces stress, anxiety, it lowers your blood pressure. So it starts in the brain and it says we're doing something good for ourselves, for the other person, for society. I mean, you can look at studies that show acts of generosity lead to everything from longer marriages, longer lives, better health, earning more.
How do we give unto others when we are barely able to keep our own lives together?
Yeah, you really went with the hard question.
That's what we do at Everford Radio.
3, 2, 1.
For somebody tuning in right now that has never watched an episode, listened, or heard any of your work before, or is like, who the hell is this guy talking? Why should they stick around? What do you think they're going to learn most from today's episode?
The power of generosity, which sounds a little cheesy. I know. When I started doing the research, I don't know that I fully had bought in. But what I have learned is that we are the only species on Earth that is truly generous, and it is what keeps our civilization alive. And I think to learn about us as just humans, because we can't help it, we're humans. What happens in our brains, our bodies, and then socially by acts of generosity is it's actually pretty magical. It's really powerful.
So you and I have a lot in common, and one of them is a background in health and the body. Is there a health advantage to being generous?
Absolutely.
What is it?
Absolutely. Many. I would start with, I believe, the brain, which is where everything happens. When we know this sort of anecdotally, right? When you do something kind, you feel good. I mean, there's a helper's high. It's called that for a reason. But neurotransmitters, endorphins, all these things are released. You really feel better. And the dopamine, the oxytocin that flood your brain, it cascades through the rest of your body. And so we can actually see that when someone is generous, when they give of themselves with no expectation of return, they just give. And it could be small. It could be a smile at the right time. And you know you've made a difference in that person's day. Our bodies literally feel it, and we continue to feel it. It's really remarkable. That cascade event, it reduces stress, anxiety, it lowers your blood pressure. So it starts in the brain and it says we're doing something good for ourselves, for the other person, for society, and then it just spreads throughout our entire body.
What about maybe someone listening that goes, I don't feel that way.
Sure.
I've tried to be nice. I've tried to be a generous tipper or give that smile, and it doesn't do anything for me. Is there still something physiologically, scientifically happening that they just don't know how to really connect to? Or, how can you describe that feeling for someone that doesn't get there?
I'd say there's a couple ways to think about it. First, we all have those days, periods. I can't speak for you, but I've had an entire period I can look at a 1-2 year window where I didn't feel like it didn't matter how much I gave, how much I did, how hard I worked. It was in the early years of entrepreneurship. It felt like a time and energy and mental suck on me at all times. So to that, I would say karma is real. And I know we can't quantify it, but an example that comes to mind for me, there was an event, I live here in DC, and there was an event at National Geographic, and I went and I gave and I spoke and I did all these things and nothing came of it. It ended up feeling like a waste of time. I felt silly. Actually, I was like, wow, I must have really bombed. They don't want anything to do with me.
Which I'm sure was not the case.
Questionable. But 5 years went by and someone reached out and said, hey, my wife and I met you at this thing. We loved what you did. We have followed your career. And I'd started a human rights firm, and they were like, we've seen X and Y, and we would love to pull you in to do this thing. And I'm leaving it kind of vague on purpose because it was a special project. And for me, it was just this moment of like, it mattered. It mattered. I worked hard. I showed up. 5 years went by, and I thought it was just this sunk cost. It wasn't. And in fact, that relationship has turned into incredible projects, all kinds of networks. Someone's sitting on the board of this global organization. And what it said to me is people remember. And when you show up and when they trust you, and that's part of what generosity really does. When you are kind to others, you build trust. That's what makes relationships. And so there's like this ripple effect. Not only do people see generous acts and then go about doing more of them themselves, and that you may not ever know about, right?
Yeah,
but you've done something very positive. But there's also this karmic effect, and one in the business world, I guess, could even call it an ROI, right? You're investing yourself in someone or something. It may not come back to you in a way that looks like what you thought. It may not be that they write you a check, right? But it will come back to you in some other way. If you're genuine about what you're putting out. And then in terms of the science side, yeah, we don't always feel the things that we're doing. We may leave a situation later and go, oh, wow, that was really bad. And I didn't realize how bad that was. But in turn, right, we can do small, kind things. And just because we don't have that immediate euphoria doesn't mean something really meaningful didn't happen. I mean, you can look at studies that show acts of generosity lead to everything from longer marriages, longer lives, better health, earning more, like your potential earning increases. Leadership is where I think you see the big difference in being generous. When you genuinely, I don't mean in a transactional way, like I'm going to be nice to you, so you work hard. When you actually care about the people you work with, your clients, whoever it is, they know that, right? We're pretty good. Our BS meters, for the most part, are pretty good. And we know. And then people work harder because they believe in you and they believe in your mission because they know that you have their back. You're looking out for them. Oh, you have a sick child? And they're like, no problem. Go to the pediatrician. You can do that tomorrow. What that does to a parent, it frees up their mind to focus on what's important. And it says, you care about me. You care about my family, my child, my spouse, my parent, if I'm caregiving, whatever. They'll work harder for you because they know you care. And so just because in that exact moment you don't all of a sudden see rainbows and puppies doesn't mean there's not something really powerful happening inside of you and inside of the other person.
So then, in order for us to get the health benefits of generosity, it can just be an act and doesn't have to be a feeling associated with it? Or is there a way to get more bang for the buck if we just so happen to act generously and get that warm, fuzzy feeling?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I have a good answer for that.
What would you speculate?
What I would speculate is that being intentional matters. So one of the things that I have a co-author, Monty Wood. This was really his idea. He should get all the credit for this. I just did
Shout out Monty.
Monty. I just did the science. But, he's a very successful business leader and has started and sold companies. And it's what he found, which is I'm successful because he's such a giver. He's such a kind person. He's more generous than anyone I've ever met. And what I would say is, we've challenged people to be, when I say intentional, I mean not just setting out to do something for behavior change sake, but actually like writing it down. And so one of our challenges is like a 30-day, right? Because it takes a couple weeks for your brain, for those neural pathways to start getting stronger. Each night, write down something you did for someone else and something you did for yourself. And if you want extra credit, how did it make you feel? What happens is you get to relive it all over again. And that actually matters.
Yes.
So in a way, you can be very intentional about how do I feel in the moment, and then later reflecting upon it, going, how do I feel now knowing what I did? Or let me think about my day. What did I do? You can be very, focused and intentional in that way and sort of help train your brain, if you will.
Yeah.
What we find is that it becomes easier and easier. I mean, it's like anything else. You do it a couple weeks, And all of a sudden it starts to become second nature and you start to see the benefits.
Well, you said it kind of takes a little bit of time for these neural pathways to get laid down for this kind of habit, we'll say, of generosity to even get more of that biofeedback aspect of generosity. So then is there a formula, is there a timeline for getting the maximal health benefits out of generosity? Or even is there an expectation someone could or should have to go, all right, I want to commit to X amount of time, X amount of reps in practicing generosity to really get that return?
Sure. So we say a month. And there's no real pinpoint on the month of what happens in terms of neuroplasticity. I would say it takes, like I said, a couple weeks for a pattern to become a habit. And it doesn't matter where you are in your life cycle. Our brains are plastic. They change, right? Neuroplasticity is real. And so if you continually go down a certain pathway, a negative one, for example, like this happens and you immediately go, wah, wah, this is what's going to happen. You're strengthening that pathway because every decision you make where you
reinforcing it in a positive or negative light.
Validate.
Absolutely.
So when you go out of your way, and like I said, it could be small, it could be a smile. It's not really going out of your way. There are limitless ways to be generous. But when you're intentional about it and you say, I'm going to do this thing when I arrive at work today, the first few times you have to remind yourself or you have to say, I'm going to do this today.
Yeah.
After a couple of weeks, you don't have to think nearly as hard about it. In fact, if you've done it for about 30 days, it becomes your brain's expectation. I do X, it's followed by Y. And every single, as you called it, rep, every rep strengthens that pathway. And it detracts from the other pathway. So we really, with every repetition, we're telling our brain what to do. And those pathways, as they build, they get stronger and stronger and stronger, and it becomes your default. And so within a couple months, you literally can become a more generous person. And some of us grew up with wonderful role models. We saw generosity demonstrated every day. We lived in homes with, if not abundance, some sort of like just giving spirit, as we call it, a lot of spirit.
Or even just lack of taking.
Yes. And there's a lot of other people who don't have that opportunity. They don't live in an environment where the people around them are natural givers. And it could be because of lack of resources, right? It's hard to give when you're struggling. And in the book, we actually say, we encourage 50-50. And I know a lot of people think that's crazy, but 50% of your generosity should be towards others and 50% should be towards yourself because you really cannot give from an empty place. And when you do, back to the very beginning, you start to become resentful. You start to say, it doesn't matter what I do, nothing's happening back for me. So you have to take care of yourself. You really do. It matters.
The few examples that you shared thus far, I think someone could just say, well, that's just being nice. That's just being kind. Okay. Are we being generous with the term generosity, or is kindness the same thing as generosity?
I would say it's a subset. There are lots of ways to be generous, and we actually redefined it. You bring up something really important. So in the U.S. in particular, and other English-speaking countries, but really in the U.S., what we found is that when you look up the word generosity, it is almost always associated with donor dollars and philanthropy.
So if I just Google generosity or people just look it up some other way, it tends to go more financial?
Yeah. You'll mostly get examples of someone who is generous with their donor advised fund.
A generous donor. Yeah. A generous tither even.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And what we found is, so what we decided to do, I guess taking a step back, is we decided to redefine generosity. And for us, it is any act of kindness done with no expectation of return. And so for us, it's about removing that transactional component. A gift, when you give it, the moment you put it in somebody else's hands, it's not yours.
Yeah.
They might love it, use it every day. They might sell it on eBay. They might throw it in the trash.
Exchange it for something completely different,
right.
Which it kind of stings a little bit.
Oh, it hurts.
Yeah.
But you gave. That's a gift. You let it go. Once it's out of your hands, it's literally out of your hands. And being generous is the same way. And so we redefined it. And following that, what we found through all of our interviews is donor dollars, philanthropy is actually, to me, I can't speak for Monty, but to me, the least tangible way to be generous.
Why? Why
Because
say that?
you can go online and you can say food security. I want to help feed children. You Google, you get a bunch of hits. You pick one. You're like, I'm going to give $10, $100. Doesn't matter. I just fed children. You feel good. You get the little email that says thank you and may have a picture of a cute kid.
And you're saying that's not generosity?
It is generosity, but it's the least tangible in the sense that it's then done. It was a transaction you did online. What we found is, and we all know this, the one thing you can never get back is time. When you give of your time, especially in person, mentorship, that's we found to be one of the most powerful forms of generosity. When you take your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, and you share that with someone else to help them in their career, give them advice about their marriage, prepare them for parenthood, whatever it is. When you give of yourself emotionally, mentally, physically, what that does for the other person and what it does for you, it sticks with you. You feel it. You can recall those memories. You remember those conversations. You may learn something in return that you take home and do or say, hey, did you know? Those things stick with you in a very different way than going click, 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 done.
Yeah.
Right? You don't feel it leave your bank account. You don't feel it, see it feed a child. So of course it's generous. And I do encourage everyone who can to give where they can to what's meaningful to them.
So is that the most beneficial way for both the recipient and the giver to practice generosity?
Yeah, I really believe it's time. It's your time and your energy. And like I said, we call it a spirit. A lot of people live with a spirit of generosity. Listening. We've all been in that situation where we were wound up about something. We were disappointed. We were hurt. We were frustrated. We were scared. We were whatever that emotion or combination of emotions is. And we needed someone to listen. They didn't even have to give advice. They didn't have to say, oh, I've been there. Like, you just needed to get it out.
I need a warm body with 2 ears that can just sit there and take it in. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And to do that for someone, to listen to them, could be the most meaningful thing you could ever do for them. But that involves your time and your energy, things you'll never get back. You can earn another dollar. And you could even say in the time, I lost this many dollars because I wasn't.
Yeah, yeah.
But what you as a human connected to another human get, just because you can't fully measure it or put a monetary value on it, doesn't mean that it's not significant to your brain and body and theirs.
Yeah, as you're describing that, I'm kind of just getting flooded back with a lot of people that have done that for me. And it's easier for me to not only remember the person, but the event, the value exchange, the time, the experience, the emotion for me, compared to anytime someone maybe gave me a gift or I haven't gotten any donations, but I don't run a nonprofit or anything, but I've had people, friends, family members, I've gotten money in the past, but it that is helpful, of course. And at the time I would definitely say, oh, that was very generous of you.
It was.
But it's more of a laundry list of the people that give me their time and mentorship.
And in those situations, I would even argue the giving of $1, and it could be that you were fresh out of a situation and broke and like, how am I going to pay my rent, right? To keep a roof over my head.
Yeah. I call that year one of entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Oh, only 1 year. Good for you. Call it year 1 through like 5. But I would argue that the person doing the handing of the check or the dollar or whatever, what they did is they helped you feel secure.
Yes.
It's not just here's $1, go get a Starbucks.
Yeah.
It's I'm
more
doing
security
this.
than generosity.
There you go.
Absolutely.
What they were giving you was I feel safe. There's a roof over my head and clean water that I can drink, right? They were preventing you from lots of other things. That to me is exceptionally generous. And so I don't want to demean the giving of $1.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's about what's behind it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just done so you could go get some extra Whole Foods, lunch, whatever.
Maybe, or in my case, it would be like spending my paycheck at Erewhon. Are you familiar? Do you know what Erewhon
No.
is? Okay, so imagine Whole Foods, but like on crack. It's
Oh, no.
Literally like a $30 smoothie. But like in LA, it's a small chain of
that's
like
right.
high-end, super healthy, farm to table, all this great food. The best hot bar ever, but you'll literally spend like $35 on lunch.
How, as an East Coast person, do you just like move to the West
Oh,
Coast? And
it's easy. You just get
so
beads.
Simply.
You go out west, you get beads, and then boom, you're
okay.
transformed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. When I was out there, that's what I missed. I missed the beads.
Yeah. Can we live a life of generosity while also keeping personal boundaries?
Absolutely.
Or do we have to completely abandon our sense of self?
No. And in fact, I would say boundaries are one of the most important elements of generosity.
So how do we establish and how do we maintain healthy boundaries while also being generous?
So this is admittedly a place where I don't always practice what I preach. And as a new-ish mom, I don't know that there's enough hours, time, energy in the world for me to actually take care of myself right now. But that's okay. This is a phase, right? This too shall pass. But earlier, I said, like you can't give from an empty well. So in that regard, and wearing my hat as a new mom, for me, it's often as simple as 5 minutes. This is my new thing, is I go outside. I have a new role that I've taken on in a work capacity that is incredibly demanding. And I work with some of the most difficult personalities out there. After my career, I can say that and mean it. And so to be a good wife, to be a good mother, all I ask for at the end of the day is 5 minutes. And I literally go outside and I just take a deep breath. Luckily, it's summer and it's hot, but I just stand there and I just sort of like breathe. And then I come in and I don't bring a lot of the baggage. I'm not saying it all goes away. I don't just go, I'm going to forget these people
But you've at
said
least
or did these
introduced a
things.
buffer.
I've put a buffer.
Yeah.
That's a great word for it, right? Between the work and the personal. And so bath time and all that stuff. Again, I'm not saying it's all gone. And I'm still thinking about it. I'm still irritated. But I didn't bring all of that into the house in this really heavy, sometimes ugly, frustrated way. And for me, that's a simple boundary. And my husband and I had to find it. And I had to compromise, right? If it were up to me, I'd take an hour and I'd go for a run and I would do whatever. But it's
He's like, honey, no.
No.
Come down a little bit.
Right. But I had to put in this thing for myself so that I could be a better me. And my husband could see it, right? Like, yes, she needs to go breathe. And now he's even changed his behavior a little and twice, which is probably a bad thing. He's been like, why don't you go for a walk around the block, right?
Why don't you take 15, honey?
Why don't you? We'll
Take
be fine.
50.
Why don't you just go for a walk? But he sees the difference.
Yeah. And that sounds like him being generous.
It is.
Yeah.
Saying, I'm going to take the toddler and right, I've been with him today and I'm frustrated, but like you need to go do something for yourself. We have to put boundaries in place and it can be our time, it can be our energy. For me, I will say the one thing about parenthood that's made boundaries better is the lack of time.
What do you mean by that?
Tiny people take up a lot of time and your priorities have to shuffle. And I have found as a woman in the last year, I have gotten exponentially better at saying, no, I can't. And sometimes I'm disappointed. There are things, especially living in DC, right? There's events. There are things I would love to do. I'm traveling all of next week preparing for, I host an event at the Super Bowl. So I'm going to New Orleans next week to start planning because you got to do that at least 6-8 months
Super
out.
Bowl's pretty big. Yeah, a lot of planning, I'm sure, involved.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
But I had to completely rearrange. Do I fly out at 6 a.m. and come home at 10 p.m. because we have a toddler? Do I pack up the toddler and my husband and go? I mean, he packs himself, but you know what I mean. Do we keep him at home and I try and actually like work and have a toddler at the same time? What do we do? And so I lived a world in which most of my work is in public health and human rights, humanitarian work. So there's an earthquake and I'm on a plane and I go and I stay and I help set up clinics and do things like that. that doesn't happen anymore. The boundaries I've had to put up about what is and isn't possible are because of the child, but they've also, they've changed everything about me. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes I'm actually disappointed. I want to go help. It's who I am. I'm a giver by nature. And I feel like when I'm not giving, I'm letting people down or I'm not doing enough. But then I also see him and I think if I left, then I'm not doing enough for him. Mm-hmm. And he is what's next, right? And he's learning and we see it every day. Like, you don't realize how much you're being watched.
Shout out Liam. Sounds like you're killing it. Killing it right now.
But you don't realize you're being watched 24/7 until they do the behavior. Yeah. They act the way you act. They mimic the thing. And then you're like, oh, no.
Oh, that's me. Mm.
Or, oh, yay. Oh, they picked that up from me, right? Yeah. Or they picked that up from my husband. That's awesome. And so those boundaries you have to put around yourself, no matter where you are in life. It could be a young person early, especially both of us being entrepreneurs. You push and push and push. And I don't know where you stand on hustle culture. I'm glad we're moving away from it.
I gave up on hustle culture probably like 5 years ago.
Same. Yeah. And I was in it, right? Yeah. And I was all about it. And I think I even hashtagged like hustle.
I went from hustle culture to sleep culture.
Ooh, I like sleep culture.
Yeah. Team sleep all day. Yeah.
Well, I'm jealous. Yeah.
I shouldn't have said that. The new mom, sorry.
I'm bitter now. I'm bitter and angry. But when you're early in entrepreneurship, that hustle mindset, you're passionate. There's something you believe in, you want to do. I feel like as a culture, we glorified this exhausted and busy for the sake of busy. No, nobody has time for that. So I think in those early years, I would say boundaries are so important because you have to know when to turn off. You have to know when to let your brain and body heal. Sleep is the best, honestly.
That's why I shifted.
Sleep. Nothing but good things happen when you sleep. Seriously. It's when all your little T helper cells come out, your body heals. You don't feel good? Go to sleep. Drink water and go to sleep. You're angry? Drink some water and go to sleep. It makes everything better. And I think so many young people and older people, but like at different stages of life, our boundaries change.
Of course.
And it's so important though to have them and know what makes you a good you.
It's really important for the listener to pick up on what you just said because I think we get attached to boundaries because they serve us. Sure. Whereas I never had boundaries with this person or this thing. Now I do. I feel safe. I feel secure. I'm thriving, all these things. But then you're going to grow and evolve and you're going to come up against those boundaries because it's time to let go of them or it's time to expand them. Boundaries for this, keeping boundaries for the sake of keeping boundaries, at least in my experience, can inevitably turn into a disservice just as much, I think, as not having them in the first place. So you need to kind of be aware of, why do I have this? When did it come into my life? And is it still necessary at that level?
Is it serving? Yeah. I think that's so important. Thank you. That's a wonderful call out because what I'm noticing is I'm right at this stage, I'm like technically a millennial, but like not, right? Like, and those of us who I think are year 1 or 2, what do they call it? Like the Oregon Trail generation or whatever.
Yeah, like you grew up on using Oregon Trail. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a whole window. It's a great article.
Oh, the amount of times I had dysentery and my whole family died and like the wagon wheel cracked. Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, so we're in the same. Yeah. And there's a great article, if you guys haven't seen it or read it, Google like Oregon Trail. There's this article that was written about like a 5-year window of people who used card catalogs and went to
the Dewey Decimal System.
Went to a computer lab and learned how to click by using Oregon Trail. But then we didn't have cell phones till we were like high school, college. So like we're a really weird cohort. Anyway.
Did you learn cursive?
Yeah.
You know they don't teach cursive anymore?
No.
Yeah. I think it's a whole nother, we need to add that to the wagon wheel, the Oregon Trail group.
I just looked down at my notes.
Yeah.
Like, did I use it?
They don't even teach cursive anymore.
I guess it doesn't really serve a purpose.
I guess.
It makes me angry.
But it's just another thing of like, oh, wow. Like the next generation is just
because they grew up doing this. Point being, my cohort of friends, like we're at a place where our parents, speaking to your boundaries and not serving you, like our parents are reaching a point where the dynamics and relationships we've had, those boundaries are changing a lot because people are getting sick. People are passing. People are like, they're losing their parents, or they're having to be caregivers all of a sudden because of that generation's health. And some of them, you've got young, I have the youngest child. Most of my friends have like 10-year-olds, but like, you've got children, you've got parents to care for, like, all these dynamics are shifting. And so the boundaries they're having to put into place are no longer what they were 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Because the dynamics have changed. And when you're having to help care for a parent, make sure they're taking their meds, trying to get them to go for a walk, right? Those relationships really change. And it's hard because that parent also, the boundaries and rules and the way they see you is they still see you in a diaper.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're trying to dictate their days, and it's tough. And so boundaries are so important. You cannot give in ways that serve you or serve other people if you're not in some sort of good place with yourself. So boundaries, whatever they may be for you, are very important.
Love that answer. Thank you so much.
It was long.
No. It all matters.
And it involved
I
word
love the
betrayal.
tangents. I'm keeping it all in. I'm just going to label this episode dysentery, ? Generosity.
Generous dysentery.
Where I want to kind of get the listeners' head wrapped around this concept where it might already be familiar for them in their life. So if a lot of times when we're trying to build or establish new habits, it's kind of hard to grasp something that like doesn't exist in our life yet. But I think in a lot of different areas, we have little like microdoses of that thing already. We just don't fully realize it. So my question is, where might we already be generous and not realize it? What are some common areas of generosity where we could possibly double down on instead of trying to just out of the blue create this new generosity lifestyle?
This is a great question. And it's actually really pertinent to me because I've been tasked with and asked, and it shocked me, to work on some curriculum. And I haven't done it yet. Well, I've started, but I've not gotten to the finish line.
School curriculum?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Right? Shocking. I did not see that being a component of the book or my research or work. But after the book came out, the area, and it's pertinent to my background, but the area where I have gotten the most response is medical schools. And so when you think about people who go to medical school and want to be doctors, for the most part, I'd say almost across the board unanimously, they're givers. They want to help.
Right.
And they realize they're making a many-year commitment to going into debt, delaying family, all those things. And so, by and large, these people are at 18, 19, 20, or like they're givers and they know they want to help. What happens is a number of things. In the current system, it's lots of medical records and computers. It's lots of debt. It's delaying often marriage, home ownership, all these American dream type things until your 40s. And sometimes you've missed the boat and you've pulled all-nighters. And I would then add, we won't go down the rabbit hole, but we had COVID. So many of these younger people early in their careers, residency, new physicians, were faced with, I won't even call it like a lack of gratitude. It was hostility.
Yeah.
And we saw it in nurses too. So I should say we see this across the medical community. It's medical schools that have been reaching out. Yeah. And to work so hard and believe in helping people and then have a lot of those people look at you and tell you they don't believe in you or your work or what you're doing. It was like its own crisis of conscience.
Yeah, the cause.
Moral injury.
It was thrown in people's faces for years,
Moral injury is what I would call it. And I never compare military service with anything else, but there are lots of comparators about that moral injury that exists and how we process it. And so a lot of universities that are teaching hospitals are looking at ways to move, like we mentioned, hustle culture and entrepreneurship. So in medical school, there was a big time in which we've talked about more grit or resiliency.
Yeah.
You need be more resilient. Your forefathers pushed through and faced adversity. And
every time someone says grit, does Angela Duckworth get a royalty? I wonder. Does she have that trademark? She should.
You deserve a round of applause for that.
That's incredible.
Well done. So, point being, since the book has come out, I'm really impressed with that. A lot of medical schools have actually been reaching out, talking about how do we support and tap into that innate ability to give and be generous with oneself.
To your point earlier, the spirit of generosity.
People who come with a spirit of giving, but they're burnt out, they're tired, they're in debt, and they're facing hostility. How do we nourish that? How do we harness it? How do we help them not lose it? How do we support them as they grow and hopefully become leaders, right? And so I've been thinking about what does curriculum look like? How do you teach generosity? Can you teach generosity? How do you help harness it? How do you recognize it? And so I don't yet have that curriculum fleshed out, but I'm really working on it. And I've talked to some elementary schools about what that means in young people and how we demonstrate it, how we show it. And what I have found is that some of the examples you asked, everyday examples, are how we interact with our, I'll say, colleagues. A lot of us work remotely now, but the space, even on Zoom or whatever, right, that you give your colleagues. And a lot of us, I think, innately, again, I'll go back to being a new parent. I don't think I ever would have judged anyone in the past if they said, I've got to go to a pediatrician appointment. I'm taking the afternoon off. I don't think I would have judged anyone. I'm like, okay, cool. Now I'm like, oh, that just set your whole day. If you're going, it's either a checkup or you're worried or there's a developmental milestone. Let me know if I can pick up X or Y for you, like to have your back, or don't worry about it. Take the whole afternoon off. I know how these things spill over. And if you've already got the baby out of the house, don't worry about rushing home or daycare off. Those things, I think, as humans, when we certainly have experiences, I think we extend generosity and generous behaviors to people in all kinds of ways that we in real time aren't thinking like, oh, I'm being really nice right now. It's empathy. Actually, if I boiled it down to one word, I would say it's empathy. And I think those examples are abundant every day if you stop and think about how are you being empathetic to someone or how are they empathetic with you? And not sympathetic, like they don't feel sorry for you, but like empathy of like, oh.
Put yourself in my shoes and vice versa, yeah.
And because I work with a lot of people who are older than me, the generosity that they have extended towards me and being an older first-time mom is off the charts. And sometimes I'm scrambling and in real time, I don't think like, oh, wow, that was really kind. But even the follow-up the next morning of, how'd it go? I'm like, he has an earache. It sucks. We were up all night. Thanks. We don't need to lose more work hours talking, but thank you for asking.
I feel seen. I feel heard. I feel respected. That
is so generous. And as in a lot of those cases, a mother to mother, especially an older mother asking me how I'm doing, it does so much for me that just sort of says, it's okay. It's okay. You're not an inconvenience. You're not setting the company back. You're dealing with something in real time. And I know what that's like. Those are acts of generosity. They're abundant throughout your day. And I guarantee everyone listening has done many today already, or they've been the recipient. I think a lot of it is just becoming aware, really self-aware of how you interact with others and how they interact with you and what you give and what you receive. Another quick little nugget that we found is, and Monty really gets all the credit for highlighting this and finding it and going, there's something here. Especially for women, because he mentors so many people, but especially young women. He said, you know what I have found is that when one is more generous, it's like they're open to receiving it in new ways. And I had to have him explain it to me a few times probably.
In order to get, I have to give.
No, it's that you just sort of wake up and go, oh, all of those little things were generous. And I didn't realize
I see.
What small little things were happening because they weren't
I see what's going on here.
Yeah. They weren't some grand gesture, right?
Yeah.
Someone behind me or in front of me didn't buy my coffee, right? Like some gesture that you could. Well, the example I just gave, logging in first thing at an 8 a.m. meeting or 7 a.m. and having someone on my team in India. It's the end of their long work day. It's 7 a.m. my time. They're in Chennai. I'm in DC. And having that woman go, oh, I heard you had to go to the doctor. How's Liam? Never until now maybe selfishly would have been like, oh, that's so generous. And now I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, she's exhausted. I know what time. It's 6 p.m. her time. She's worked
Yeah.
a full day. She's about to go home to 4 kids.
Yeah.
But she stopped and asked me how I'm doing and how my son's doing. Like that connection, we've never met in person. We've been colleagues for years over Zoom, right? I've lived and worked in India, but I've never met her.
Yeah.
I've never been to that office. Those sorts of things to me they're so meaningful. They're so powerful. They connect us. That's what I said earlier about building trust and relationships. And those small things, I don't think I would have appreciated before, but for writing this book, but for going through these certain experiences. And now I see like throughout the day, and I really do have to, like my life has gotten better and I'm much happier than I used to be, even with lack of sleep.
Love to hear that, by the way. I'm happy for you. That's
Thank
good
you.
to hear. Yeah.
I'm in a great place. I'm really content with life. And I think it's because I have become so appreciative from my work overseas over the years, like simple things like clean water and a roof over my head. And those small acts of people connecting from all over the world every day. It could be your colleague, it could be your parent, it could be somebody you pass on the street. But for me, it's the work I do. Those small things, it's like all of a sudden I'm open to them. I recognize them in real time. And when someone asks, oh, how is so-and-so doing? I can tell you their job performance is like 70% of the equation for me at this point. Because I'm like,
Wow.
they're good at their job.
Yeah.
But she's a really thoughtful person. And if she extends those courtesies to me, I know she's great with her team. And she may be having a bad month. I don't know what's going on in her house. I don't know what's going on in their office, right? But I know what kind of person she is. Here's the kinds of things that are being extended to me. Let me ask some of those same questions to her because I know how it made me feel when someone asked how I was doing. And last week, shockingly, I had a colleague, again, I've never met in person. She cried on the phone for a while. It hurt. The rest of my day sucked, right? Because I felt so awful.
It's hard to bounce back after a phone call meeting.
Right.
Or a crying meeting. Yeah.
But the next day, it was like we had a complete reset. And even other people commented at the meeting, like she was more engaged, she was this, she was that. And I was like,
Because you shared that vulnerable experience with
I
her.
was like, I just listened.
Yeah.
I just listened. And I don't deserve a medal for it. I don't deserve any generosity award. Like people have extended those courtesies to me. I then said, what can I learn from them to do for someone else? I didn't expect that to happen. I expected like most of us to be like, I'm fine, right? Lock it away. Don't open that Pandora's box. But she opened it. And I just listened. And I think as a team, no one else on the team knows, but I think we as a team are better for it.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah. Someone just needed the space to be like, this is shit. It sucks. I hurt and I don't know how to express it because she has 3 kids, right? She's like, I can't just break down. I have more than a full-time job. It's just an hour that I've listened. And like I said, I think we're all better for it. And the rest of the team has no idea. But they know she's happier.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's
and
calmer.
That's ultimately what matters most, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that might come to mind for somebody when they think generosity, it did for me, was it's kind of like acts of love. You know, to be generous is to be loving. And you know, what is it? One of the golden rules, right? From I'm showing my Southern Baptist here. Love thy neighbor as thyself.
Oh, yeah.
But what if we struggle with self-love? What if we are not at a place where we really, truly love ourselves and we're not maybe being loving or kind to ourselves? Therefore, we feel like we can't be generous to and for and with ourselves, so we can't give it out. What would you say to that person?
It's a really powerful question because it is so hard. This is not criticism towards anyone, myself included, who's been there. It's really hard to get out of your own way. And so when you're in a place, it's really hard to get out of that place and to be self-aware and if you're already there, to have the space and time and bandwidth to just pull yourself up, right? Like it's so much harder than that. I would say taking on some of the things we've already talked about, when you're in a really unhealthy mental and emotional space, first of all, there is help, right? And that can come in any form. That can come in therapy. For some, it's pharma. For others, it's someone to listen. It's empathy. It's relationships. But if you do acts that are generous to yourself and to others, what I would say is there's no magic. It's not pharma, right? There's no pill. But through those acts, through being more open and receptive and aware of what you're doing, I think it really shows you how connected we all really are. You're not alone. You're not on an island. Even if at this moment you feel that way and you're not in touch with your family or something, right? Shit happens. Not everybody's a good person, and not everyone's going to be good to you or for you, right? Back to boundaries. And sometimes relationships have existed your whole life don't need to exist anymore because you can't be a good whole person, a healthy person with those relationships. And that's hard. I mean, there's nothing harder than breaking off. It could be a relationship with your family, alcohol. I mean, pick your thing, right? Whatever it is. If you've had a long-term relationship that was codependent in any way, or you leaned on in a time that was hard, those are so hard to break. Our brains hate change, absolutely hate change. And so I think for me, part of writing this book, it's about the little things. The little things really add up and they really matter. No 1 month of doing something nice every day is necessarily going to pull you out of that place, but it will show you that things can be better.
So generosity doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It doesn't
Absolutely
have to be
not.
going out of our way. It doesn't have to
No.
be giving all of our money away, giving all of our time away.
It doesn't have to take anything away from you or your day at all.
Would you
As
say
I s-
generosity shouldn't take anything away from the person giving?
I'd say it depends. I don't think it should take away in the sense of causing any harm. So one of the things that we also define in the book is sort of self-generosity. And we say anything that's taken to like extreme, or that's not self-generous, right? If if you're doing something that's overindulging, that's not actually being generous with yourself. It's masking or muting the way that you're feeling. It's covering it up. It's sort of putting a Band-Aid on it or distracting yourself. That's not really self-generous. It's something that moves you towards the person you want to be. Those things. So doing something really hard and frustrating could be generous to yourself because you're moving yourself in the direction
absolutely.
that you want to go in.
It's very generous to your future self, to your higher self.
And so, small acts every day, little things that make a difference to you and to other people. It is a slow process. It is a self-aware process. It's an intentional process. There is no magic pill. Yeah. We know that by now. Humans have existed long enough to know there's seriously. No magic.
Yeah. I want to ask one more question before my final, kind of being mindful of your time here. Yeah. How do we keep the generosity mindset when times are tough? How do we give unto others when we are barely able to keep our own lives together?
Yeah, you really went with the hard question.
That's what we do at Everford Radio.
This is where I would say it goes back to that social. And so when people talk about health, for the life of me, I do not know why we say mental health versus physical health. It's your health. It's
health is everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's emotional, right? How you feel is your health. Like it's all there. So, but there's another area that I think we don't talk about enough. This is the doctor of public health in me coming out. It's the social health. We are social beings. We are wired that way. We are built that way. That's how we've survived. We are social. And we saw what happened, particularly to young people in the COVID days of isolation. I thought the marketing around that was so stupid. When we say like, you've got to be socially distant. I remember here in DC in the very early days, it was like, we have to be socially distant. I was like, no, we don't.
Yeah.
We have Zoom. We have phones. We're not socially distant at all. We're physically distant. That mindset to me is completely different. And if we told people stay 6 feet apart,
Wholeheartedly agree.
but we can do this. We can look at screens. We can be social. I think we are social people. And I think we have to recognize and appreciate at all times that everything we do impacts the fabric of society. And I think about, like, an example I sometimes give, it's transportation related, but hear me out. Just, when a mother, for example, or a father, but we'll say a mother makes a decision and she has a sick child and she has to take 3 buses, right? 3 buses to get there. I've seen this in practice. I had a mother who went through the same thing when I was living in Chicago and I was working in an emergency department. And the doctor was like, do this, and come back tomorrow. I remember being like, there's no way she's coming back tomorrow. No. First of all, she's got 3 kids. She took 3 buses and had to take a whole day off work for these shenanigans. That's 3 buses home, too. That's her whole day. It's shot. And if she's taking a bus to get here, that means she doesn't have a car. That means she's not got other public transit or family resources. Like, there's a reason she's not coming back tomorrow. There is no follow-up. And so for me, examples like that of seeing, we're humans. Like, in real time, we have to, as I see it, always be thinking about that fabric. Transportation is public health. Housing is public health. Education is public. They're all the greater public. And so, wherever we are in our life, a great place, a terrible place, just sort of surviving whatever phase we're in, everything we do impacts people around us and impacts their behavior towards us.
Ooh, yes, absolutely.
And so I say that to say, like, there's no small act that, even if you aren't feeling it in real time, isn't having an impact or an effect on someone else. If you are thoughtful about the people around you and what they're going through, or you've made a difference. That sort of awareness and thoughtfulness, it completely changes how we interact with each other.
Yeah.
And it's not hokey. It's not like, I don't mean it that way. I really mean it like, we're all in this together and this is all we get.
That's the beauty of what you're talking about and your work is you can choose to believe that generosity is just this airy-fairy, karmic energy vibe thing out there, and it's still going to work. Or you can look at the practical applications and what happens in that energetic exchange physiologically, like we talked about at the beginning.
Energy too,
so it doesn't matter what you believe about generosity. The fact is, when you act through and because of generosity, all of those things begin to happen. The smallest little step or the biggest leap. You
just did what I think's taken me like an hour in a matter of seconds. So,
well, that's because I had an hour with you to kind of extract all this information, and
that was like the best marketing job ever, right there.
I'll send you the clip. Well, I have an idea of how this is going to help me move forward in my life, but I want to get your interpretation of those 2 words, kind of highlighting your work now and having my audience hear, your definition and explanation of how we can live more live more generously, so that we can move forward in our life, ever forward. What do those 2 words mean to you? How do you live a life ever forward?
I think the short answer is, how do I make the world better, happier, healthier, whatever that means for people. My body of work, I think, is committed to that. It could be making sure that girls can go to school or someone has access to food or clean water. We take so many of those things for granted. And so I think I'm just sort of committed to that. But I would add this layer, and I've already brought it up, but, as a new first-time mom, it is wearing my neuroscience hat, like the number of connections that my son makes every day, watching him learn in real time, get frustrated, but then go to sleep at night, wake up and do the thing.
You're watching neurons fire in real time.
Literally. Yeah. I literally go, oh, look at his little frontal lobe work, right? Like, oh, I'm so proud of him. Emotional regulation, not there. Absolutely none. But when I think of ever forward, it now has this new meaning to me Because the way I see it to all the things we've talked about, and no, I'm absolutely not at all perfect and always kind and always generous to him, to my husband, to myself. But I am so self-aware of all the things I do determine how he's going to interact with the world. And no, I can't just stick him in my backpack and run off to Haiti after an earthquake and say, this is how a clinic works. This is how we set up supplies. This is how we treat people. I can't do those things anymore with a toddler, but I can constantly demonstrate for him how to problem solve, how to be empathetic, how to do acts of kindness or generally just be more generous. And I have found that I am more generous with him, honestly, since writing the book. Because he gets frustrated when he can't do something. He's never seen it before, never done it before. Doesn't even have the motor skills to accomplish the thing he wants to do.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah,
Not even his
fair
fault.
enough.
But to see him get frustrated, to see him get upset, or when he's sick and feels so helpless, I really do think that is where, for me at the moment, moving forward and impacting his life, I have been a more generous person because my patience, even if it's shot, I'm in a better place where I can pause and go, what's the best thing I can do for him right now? What's the best thing I can do for me right now? Do they work together? And if not,
Very important. Yeah.
what's the compromise that nobody gets hurt? And so just thinking constantly about all those things and how they impact him. And I hope he is a much more patient and kind person than I think I was or my husband was when we were younger.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because he will have it demonstrated for him constantly. And given that we had him so late in life, I really do think about forward in a different way than people maybe in their 20s do.
Yeah.
Because there's a legacy component there
Yeah.
that he'll probably be our only child. And that's it, right? This is what we leave to the world. I can leave a body of work. But most of my work's humanitarian, so there's no building with your name on it. There's nothing like that, right? It's just knowing the good work is out there. People lived longer, healthier, better, or got resources they didn't previously have. That's my forward. That's what I give to the world. But he's a tangible thing that I'm putting out there. So to me, that's a really new but powerful way to think about forward.
I love that interpretation. There's never a right or a wrong answer. I tell everybody. So I'm going to highlight the book here real quick. We're going to have it linked for you guys down in the show notes in the video box. But Generosity Wins, How and Why This Game-Changing Superpower Drives Our Success. Where can my audience go to connect and learn more about you and your work?
I'm easy to find. Nicole F. Roberts. I use my middle initial because I have the most basic name on the face of the earth. So Nicole F. Roberts, I'm everywhere. And we actually have our own site, generositywins.us. And the reason is because in our entrepreneurial spirit as well, you can buy from the big retailers, but for the same price, same quick shipping, we knocked a few dollars off. And what we really encourage is actually gifting. We
that's perfect.
Set a big goal.
Don't buy the book, gift the book.
I mean, really serious. We encourage
That's
people,
amazing.
get one for yourself, but gift it to other people. Like the point is, especially, like right now we're doing graduations and things like that, but to help others, be generous. Give them a book about how to be more generous. The best way to help someone else is literally give them resources to help. And if you go to generositywins.us, we actually have a resource page and all of our mission, vision, purpose, how to build your own, all those things. All those resources are there for free. We also have, I don't know if I can find it, but so we wrote a business fable. It's not just a how-to book. You actually get to read about a person who's somewhat interesting. I think so. She's kind of like a younger version of me in a way. But at the end of each chapter, because they're real people, are QR codes. So you can actually hover over the QR code. Every single story and chapter takes you to a real person, to their LinkedIn page.
No way. Wow.
Yeah, so you can connect with everyone.
What a great idea. I love that
you just
idea.
saw Beth is the one I said, you just hover over it, take you right to her LinkedIn page.
It's like choose your own adventure.
It's exactly what it's like.
I love it. Does that also date us as choose your own adventure? Is that in the Oregon Trail category?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Team Oregon Trail, Team Choose Your Own Adventure, Team Cursive.
Dysentery.
No dysentery. We're good now. But
We're not Team Dysentery.
Nicole, this was incredible. Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
so generous with your time
thank
and coming on the
you.
show here today. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Fiend.